Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 322 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. Ongoing autumn checks are continuing to reveal, for the most part, some very healthy colonies, and these are well provisioned for the cold weeks that lay ahead. Hefting confirms some very weighty Langstroth brood boxes. It's why I like them. I did, however, discover one colony that had failed, and today I want to talk through how you too can spot the signs and prevent disease from swamping your apiaries. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. Hi everyone, podcast time once more, and it's starting to get a little chilly in the office here at HQ. That said, what an incredible sunrise this morning here in Norfolk. A blood red sky as the sun started to appear and the clouds turned a very dark red. Obviously, you would have to be out and about very early to have caught it. For myself, I was awake around the fairly normal time of 5:30am and happened to glance outside as I was making my first coffee of the day. I had to stop and go outside to stare at it. Even now, I find the whole natural world and everything in it fascinating. I guess it's why I love beekeeping so much. Anyway, the cooler air soon brought me to my senses, and I hurried back inside to warm up again with my coffee. I suspect many of you are now feeling the effects of the cooler weather and how that's impacting on your colonies. Now, I know I don't have a particularly great track record when it comes to predicting or forecasting the weather, but for me, here in Norfolk, it does look like we may be in for a last hurrah of warm weather as the sun clings on with a little heat now that we're heading into October proper. I am, of course, using the, by now, famous BBC weather app, so that all could change within a few hours. However, Monday is looking like a very comfortable 19 degrees Celsius for us, and the warm feeling should cling on until midweek. Not that I want to attempt any kind of countryfile style weather report here, but the outlook up to the middle of the week looks pretty good. So the point here is if you have any last-minute jobs around the hives to complete, now might be a really good time to sort them. Of course, many beekeepers have proper jobs and can only look at hives over the weekend. Today, if you're listening to this early, might be the best of the weekend weather for some time to come, so best get cracking on with it. What on earth could still be left to do, I hear you cry, and for most hobbyist beekeepers with just a few colonies, you'd probably be right to ask. Most jobs should have been completed some time ago, treatment sorted and all that kind of thing, but feeding might still be happening, and for those on a late summer and early autumn crop, there may well still be supers to come off. I know we were looking at supers just this week with the hope of seeing some ivy honey being stored, but alas, of all the supers on our hives, there's probably only one or maybe two that have any appreciable amounts of honey in them. For the rest, mainly those at the fishing lakes apiaries, we've been leaving the supers on and have under-supered them on all of the hives. Can you believe that it was so warm in the middle of the week that I actually broke into a sweat? Such fantastic weather to work in at this time of the year. The bees were very active, but it's noticeable that the ivy is just about finished and bees are looking at any source of pollen and nectar now as they scramble to provision for the winter months. If you live in an urban area with plenty of gardens, you'll probably see honeybees on all manner of flowers that maybe you wouldn't automatically think they would look to. I've seen them on asters and dahlias, roses and sunflowers most recently. In fact, any single-petalled flowering plant will provide something for our bees. Even those tightly multi-petalled flowering plants that our bees can't normally get into, when fully open, will allow honeybees access. And if the opportunity arises, the ever-opportunistic honeybee will grab at a chance of stocking up on pollen and nectar. I have a very small clematis in a pot in the back garden, a new plant that I'm trying my best not to kill. It has been flowering recently, just 2 or 3 sad little flowers, the plant tucked away almost out of sight, yet this week I saw a honeybee working it. Where there's a flower, there's usually a honeybee, particularly at this time of the year it seems. Now I come on to the serious point about this concerning our honeybee colonies. They're looking for food. They're searching everywhere and pretty much everything for whatever food stores they can find. Inevitably, this also means any empty boxes, any part-filled frames, and anything left lying around the apiary or shed or garage or outbuilding. It's likely to be found. Just this week here at the unit, I've had some help from a close friend, mainly washing and cleaning. I mean, who really wants to do that? And if someone offers, well, you're going to take them up on it. Anyway, we're just finishing off the clean-up of the honey room, and that always means washing up. I had to go out to check on the bees and record a video or two at the fishing lakes, so he stayed behind with instructions to take a few bits and bobs outside and wash them down. There was the frame carousel, for starters, then the large honey settling tank, and finally the uncapping tank with the brush uncapper still attached to it. Just as an aside, the longer you keep bees, and the longer the seasons pass, you kind of get into a routine with all of these things, and experience teaches you to do some things in a particular way, and more importantly, to not do things in a particular way, as it always ends up in trouble. One of those things is to not take all of the equipment outside at once, but to take each bit out as you clean it. Now, I guess you've obviously jumped ahead in this little story in your own minds. He took all 3 pieces of equipment outside, did a splendid job cleaning the carousel and settling tank, but then I had a frantic telephone call from him saying he had masses of honeybees all over the uncapping tank and brush uncapper, and didn't want to hose them down for fear of killing them and becoming the target of the angry response from those that didn't succumb to his hosing. You could hear the fear in his voice. I told him to take it back inside, shut the door, and the bees would fly to the light of the front door, and then when I got back, I could let them out where they would fly back to their hives. Well, there certainly were a good number of bees in the unit on my return. The local population of honeybees had discovered the honey and wax in the uncapping tank and brush uncapper, and word had spread very, very quickly. How do they do that so fast? There were literally hundreds of them. Anyway, I left the front door open, and the vast majority of them got back outside and headed back to their hives. The uncapper was moved back to the honey room, with just a dozen or so bees remaining stubbornly in place. Now, back at the apiary, what if there's a colony that's died out because of disease, and the rest of your bees or other beekeepers' colonies have found it? They're going to strip it bare, and they'll do that pretty quickly. Most of the time, it's not really a huge issue. I know we talk about it often, and we talk about closing down colonies, but honestly, there may be some chalk brood, nosema possibly, maybe some other viral infections, but nothing generally too serious. But occasionally, you might get unlucky. Chronic bee paralysis virus might have been the culprit for that dead colony, or worse still, one of the foul brood diseases. Here, infections can spread very quickly and be devastating to the beekeeper and their apiary, and I've seen from personal experience in helping other beekeepers when I spent time as a seasonal bee inspector just how devastating it is for the beekeeper. And it can be heartbreaking for them too. So, be vigilant. My aim here is not to worry you into sleepless nights. I'm sure you're going to have those anyway as we head through the winter, and you'll be thinking about whether you fed your bees enough or not. From here on out, it's all about watching the entrance and seeing what's going on. There's the normal order of things in a healthy colony. The entrance of that hive will show you just how the normal day-to-day activities unfold and continue. Guard bees patrolling the inner area of the entrance, making an occasional appearance before reversing back to take up position again. Foraging bees leaving the hive, not so many now of course, but still heading out for food, but also water and to some extent propolis. I've seen some bees recently coming back with little sticky clumps of propolis ready to fill all of those annoying drafty spots. Interestingly, on all of the Technoset hives we currently have, and you'll remember they have this integrated feeder, you've probably spotted them on the videos. These feeders stay on the hive all year round, and within the feeders they have slotted ventilation sections. All of these have been filled with propolis. The bees really don't like them there at all, and if the bees don't want them left open, it's probably best to leave them. I used to clean it off. To me, it looked untidy, messy, a bit like I was a lazy beekeeper that couldn't be bothered to clean his equipment. Now I think if the bees want it that way, it's probably in their best interests to leave it alone. Anyway, back to the entrance of the hive. Workers will be returning, sometimes laden with a little pollen, sometimes not. But it all looks ordered. It all looks like it's meant to be happening in that way. As a beekeeper, part of your learning experience is to watch and see what's happening. Try to understand what's happening and why. Ask yourself, does it all look normal? Just this week, while Steph and I were filming at the fishing lakes, I spotted something that didn't look normal. And I only spotted it because I've spent years watching and seeing what's going on at the entrance. A hive brought back from the borage in late summer, in the middle of the apiary, bees coming and going, and on the face of it, nothing to be concerned about. But hang on a minute, it just seems a little rushed. There doesn't seem to be that more normal, ordered appearance. None of the bees going into the hive were bringing back any pollen. Not necessarily an issue, but there ought to be a little pollen going in. I think I'll take a closer look. I stood at the entrance watching for just 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute, and the problem revealed itself quite quickly. First one, then another. Wasps. But wasps flying out of the hive unchallenged. The hive was being robbed out. You'll find, with just a few minutes of watching a healthy, what I would call normal queen-right hive, you'll soon gain an understanding of how activity at the entrance looks. Once you know that, anything out of the ordinary soon shows itself. It's a bit like looking for disease in brood frames. Just don't bother. Don't look for disease. Look for healthy brood. If you can do that, anything that isn't healthy will stick out very quickly, and you'll be able to then have a closer look. I'll shoot some beginner videos showing this technique in the new year once we get through to spring again. So, the hive was being robbed. Why? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's to open it up and take a closer look. Luckily for me, the hive had only recently become a target of these robbing bees and wasps. It was just a brood box, no super on it, so floor, brood box, integrated feeder and roof. Simple to get into and to check. Looking at the brood frames, the problem for me was easily enough to see. It was Varroa damage that had killed the colony, an overwhelming number of Varroa. The brood box was completely empty of adult bees. It was almost as if they had absconded, yet there were lots of cells with dark, sickly-looking brood, near adult bees in some cases, but no eggs or open brood, just empty cells, apart from each frame having a large arch of honey and pollen around the top of the open cells, all capped at this point. It looked like any robbing that had taken place had cleaned out any open cells of food, but as yet the capped cells hadn't been breached. Wasps and honeybees were gathering at the entrance, and without any question, if this hive had been left another week, it would have resulted in the entire brood box being robbed out. Now, what if this colony had died of American foul brood, let's say? Spores would have been taken from this dead hive to many other colonies, not just in my apiary, but possibly to other beekeepers' apiaries. We have a responsibility, not just to our bees, but to other beekeepers, to maintain a level of vigilance in order to prevent the spread of disease. I closed the entrances to this dead colony and removed it from the apiary. I'm as close to 100% certain that it's a Varroa issue, but I'm not taking any chances. The frames will be rendered down and not immediately reused as they are. They'll be cleaned and fitted with fresh foundation to be used again next season. Here at the fishing lakes, this is my first casualty colony. It's a shame I didn't spot it earlier, as I may well have been able to get into the colony early enough to treat them and help them survive. I've posted a few video shorts recently. Well, if I'm honest, it's all Steph's good work, but you'll see a couple of videos showing just how active the bees have been. The colonies are all looking in great shape for the most part, and of course the onset of the colder months will see a dramatic slowdown of activity. Hopefully we've done enough to get them all set up to see out the winter. Finally, we had a count up around the apiaries last week to have the final number of colonies at the start of the autumn and winter period. In total, we have 57 Langstroth colonies, 29 14 by 12 nukes, and one lonely commercial colony. I don't know how it's hanging on really, but there it is. We still have one lonely commercial. So, a total of 87 colonies to babysit through the cold weather to come. With luck, we'll be able to hold on to as many of those as we can through to next spring. So if you know anyone who's looking for an overwintered nuke next spring, do tell them to get in touch via my website www.norfolk-honey.co.uk, and I'll add them to my list. Well, that's it for this week. Don't forget to check out my website, www.norfolk-honey.co.uk, and for my latest videos and podcasts with more updates, tips and techniques, it's the same Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey. And remember, I'm Stewart Spinks, and that was Beekeeping Short and Sweet.